The first time I heard the Thornkeeper speak, I was 3 days into the Alkali Flats with nothing but sand in my boots and regret in my belly. My water had run out that morning, and the twin suns of perdition were cooking me slow and steady, like meat on a spit. I'd come to this god-forsaken rock chasing a bounty, some corporate executive who'd embezzled half the terraforming budget and fled to the outer rim. Standard job, or so I thought. What I hadn't counted on was the water wars, the dried-up settlements, and the fact that every drop of moisture on this planet belonged to something that shouldn't exist. My name's Cassidy Thorne, and I've been hunting bad men across 3 star systems for the better part of a decade. I've seen pirates who'd sell their own mothers for scrap metal, and corporate killers who'd poison a whole colony for quarterly profits. But I'd never seen anything like what waited for me at Salvation Springs. The settlement rose from the desert like a fever dream. Adobe buildings bleached white by the suns, their walls cracked and weeping salt. Solar collectors caught what light they could, feeding power to the moisture farmers that stood sentinel around the town's perimeter. But those machines were silent now, their arms folded like the wings of dead birds. I limped down the main street, my throat raw as sandpaper. A few locals watched me from doorways and windows, their faces gaunt with thirst. Children peered out from behind their mothers' skirts, eyes too large in their thin faces. This wasn't just drought. This was systematic starvation. The saloon doors hung open, inviting, but somehow ominous. I stepped inside, spurs jangling against the worn wooden floor. The bartender was a thin man with skin like old leather, polishing a glass that would never hold water again. "Whiskey," I croaked. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ain't had whiskey in 3 months, stranger. Ain't had much of anything wet." "What happened here?" The man set down his glass and looked at me with hollow eyes. "Same thing that's happened to every settlement from here to the Broken Teeth Mountains. The Thornkeeper's got himself a new hobby." I'd heard whispers of the Thornkeeper in the port cities, stories that made hardened spacers cross themselves and order another drink, a plant consciousness that had somehow survived the terraforming, grown massive and strange in the deep desert. Most folks figured it for legend, the kind of tale that grows in the telling. "Thought that was just spacer talk," I said. "Wish it were." The bartender gestured toward the window, where the heat shimmer made the horizon dance. "Used to be. The old growth would let us tap the aquifer, long as we didn't take too much. Symbiosis, you might say. Then something changed. Started demanding tribute." "What kind of tribute?" "Poetry." The word fell from his lips like a stone into a well. "Old earth poetry, stuff from before the Exodus. Shakespeare, Frost, Dickinson, that kind of thing. Problem is, most of us out here can barely read, let alone recite verse." I felt a chill, despite the heat. "And if you don't pay?" He pointed to a photograph on the wall, a group of settlers standing beside a well, smiling faces full of hope. Half the people in that picture were missing from the saloon. "Dried up," he said simply. "From the inside out." I thought about the man I was chasing, wondered if he was already dead, or if he'd managed to buy his way into the Thornkeeper's good graces. Either way, I needed water, and I needed information. Both lay in the same direction. "How far to the springs?" "Half-day's ride, if you got a ride. Walking?" He shrugged. "Might make it by nightfall, if the heat don't take you first." I had credits, but credits couldn't buy what wasn't there. I had my sidearm, but you can't shoot thirst. What I needed was poetry, and that was something I hadn't thought about since my academy days, back when I still believed in justice and happy endings. The bartender must have seen something in my face. "You got some learning, don't you? I can tell by the way you talk." "Some." I'd been a literature major once, back on New Geneva, before the war changed everything, and I learned that sometimes the only justice comes from the barrel of a gun. Been a while since I flexed those muscles. Well, you better start stretching. Thornkeeper don't accept substitutes, and he sure don't take IOUs. I bought directions with the last of my water rations and headed back into the furnace. The path to Salvation Springs wound through a maze of red rock canyons, following what had once been a river. Ancient bones littered the dried riverbed, not human bones, but the calcified remains of whatever had lived here before the terraformers came. The heat was a living thing, pressing down on me with malevolent intent. My clothes stuck to my skin, and every breath felt like swallowing fire. But I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, because that's what you do when you're too stubborn to die. As the suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold, I crested a rise and saw Salvation Springs spread out below me. It wasn't much, a cluster of buildings around a natural amphitheater carved from living rock. But at the center of that amphitheater, rising like a cathedral spire, stood the Thornkeeper. I'd expected something alien, something that would make my skin crawl and my mind rebel. Instead, I found myself looking at something almost beautiful. The cactus, if you could still call it that, towered 60 feet into the air, its trunk thick as a redwood and covered in thorns the size of sword blades. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its surface, and at its crown, a massive flower bloomed in defiance of the desert heat. But it was the eyes that stopped me cold. Hundreds of them, scattered across the plant's surface like dark jewels. They tracked my movement as I descended into the amphitheater, and I felt the weight of an intelligence older and stranger than anything I'd encountered in my travels. "Welcome, Hunter." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the ground beneath my feet and the air around me. "I have been expecting you." I stopped at the edge of what I took to be a safe distance, though something told me that safety was an illusion here. "You know why I'm here? You seek the one who calls himself Morrison. He came to me 3 days ago, bearing gifts of verse and promises of more. A cultured man, for a thief. So my quarry was still alive. That was something at least. I need water, and I need to take Morrison back to face justice." The Thornkeeper's laugh was like wind through dry leaves. Justice. Such a small word for such a large concept. "Tell me, Hunter, do you know why I require poetry?" I thought about it, trying to piece together the psychology of a plant intelligence. Loneliness, perceptive. I am the last of my kind, the final remnant of this world's original consciousness. Your terraformers were thorough in their work, but they could not erase everything. I survived, changed, evolved. And in my long solitude, I discovered something beautiful in your species' words. The bioluminescent pattern shifted, pulsing in rhythm with some alien heartbeat. Your poetry speaks of longing, of loss, of the brief, bright flame of existence in an indifferent universe. These are concepts I understand intimately. And if I can't pay your price, then you will join the others. The Thornkeeper gestured with one massive limb toward a collection of shapes I'd taken for rocks. Looking closer, I realized they were desiccated corpses, their faces frozen in expressions of terminal thirst. I closed my eyes, reaching back through the years to my university days, to long nights spent reading by lamplight while my classmates partied. What came to mind was Coleridge, the rhyme of the ancient mariner, fitting, given my circumstances. Water, water, everywhere, I began, my voice cracking with thirst, nor any drop to drink. The Thornkeeper's eyes brightened. Ah, yes, the tale of the cursed sailor, doomed to wander for his crimes against nature. Continue. I recited what I could remember, stumbling over half-forgotten verses, but the plant seemed pleased with my effort. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through thorns. Adequate, the Thornkeeper pronounced. You may drink. A root emerged from the sand near my feet, its tip opening to reveal a hollow, filled with clear, sweet water. I drank deeply, feeling life flow back into my parched body. It was the best water I'd ever tasted, cool and pure and somehow alive. Now, I said, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. About Morrison. He's there. Another gesture, this time toward a small building at the edge of the amphitheater. He has been entertaining me with recitations from his personal collection. A man of refined tastes, though questionable morals. I approached the building cautiously, hand on my sidearm. The door was unlocked, and inside I found my quarry sitting at a small table, reading from a leather-bound book. He looked up as I entered, a middle-aged man with soft features and nervous eyes. "You're Thorne," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's right. You're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. We can do this easy or hard." Morrison laughed, but there was hysteria in it. "Easy? Hard? Do you have any idea what's happening here? That thing out there is holding an entire planet hostage for poetry." "Poetry? And you want to talk about embezzlement?" "I want to talk about the families you left without clean water when you stole their terraforming funds." He had the grace to look ashamed. That was different. I never meant for people to get hurt. But they did get hurt. And now you're going to face the consequences. I cuffed him with restraints designed for space travel, but as we stepped outside, the Thornkeeper's voice stopped us. "I think not, Hunter." Roots erupted from the ground around us, forming a cage of living wood. Morrison whimpered, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd expected something like this. "We had a deal," I said. "Indeed. You paid for water and you received it. But I made no agreement regarding your prisoner." "What do you want?" "Morrison has something precious. A complete collection of pre-Exodus poetry stored in his neural implant. I would be reluctant to lose such a treasure." I looked at Morrison, who nodded miserably. "Insurance policy," he said. "Figured it might come in handy out here in the Rim territories. Never thought I'd need it to buy water from a talking cactus." The Thornkeeper's thorns gleamed in the starlight. "Release him to me, and you may go free. Attempt to take him, and you will both join my collection of the desiccated." I considered my options. I could try to fight, but what do you do against something that controls the very ground beneath your feet? I could try to bargain, but what did I have that the Thornkeeper wanted more than Morrison's poetry collection? Then it hit me. The Thornkeeper wasn't just collecting poetry. It was collecting human experience, human emotion distilled into verse, and I had something it might want more than Morrison's stolen database. I've got a better offer, I said. The alien eyes fixed on me with predatory interest. Speak. You want poetry? I'll give you something Morrison's collection doesn't have. Original work. A poem about this place, this moment. Something that's never existed before. The Thornkeeper was quiet for a long moment. You would compose verse? Here, now, under threat of death? That's when the best poetry gets written. When everything is on the line, and you've got nothing left to lose. And if your work displeases me, then we both die, and you get Morrison's collection anyway. But if it pleases you, I let the implication hang in the air. Very well, but know this, I have consumed the works of your greatest poets. My standards are elevated. The roots retreated slightly, giving me room to move, but not to escape. I stood in the center of the amphitheater, looking up at the alien intelligence that held our lives in its thorns, and I reached for words that might save us. In the deep desert where the twin suns burn, I began, my voice carrying across the stone. Stands a guardian older than human dreams, thorned and patient, beautiful and strange, keeper of the water, keeper of the word. I paused, feeling the weight of the Thornkeeper's attention, like a physical thing. Lonely as starlight, ancient as stone, you remember the songs of a world that's gone. In human verses you find some small piece, an echo of voices that never will cease. The bioluminescent patterns along the Thornkeeper's trunk began to pulse faster, brighter. We are brief candles in an endless night, burning bright and brief before we're done. But in our words, something remains, love and loss and hope and pain. These gifts we offer, freely given, to the last dreamer in a desert prison. I stopped, breathing hard, sweat running down my face despite the cool night air. The Thornkeeper was silent, its eyes reflecting starlight like dark mirrors. Crude, it said finally. Unpolished. The meter is inconsistent, and the rhyme scheme lacks sophistication. My heart sank. But, the Thornkeeper continued, it speaks truth. And truth, Hunter, is rarer than technical perfection. You have given me something Morrison's stolen collection cannot. Authenticity born of desperate circumstance. The root cage dissolved, and I felt my knees nearly buckle with relief. Take your prisoner, the Thornkeeper said, but know that you are always welcome here. Bring me more of your crude truths, and you will never lack for water. I hauled Morrison to his feet, not trusting my voice to respond. As we walked away from the amphitheater, the corporate thief looked back at the towering plant. That thing's gonna hold this whole planet hostage, he said. Maybe. I thought about the dried-up settlements, the children with too large eyes. Or maybe it's just lonely. Maybe all it really wants is someone to talk to. You think poetry is going to solve the water crisis? I didn't answer immediately. We walked in silence through the cooling desert, following the ancient riverbed back toward civilization. Above us, unfamiliar constellations wheeled across the sky, and somewhere behind us, the Thornkeeper stood vigil over its domain. I think, I said finally, that sometimes the strangest problems need the strangest solutions. And sometimes the thing you think is your enemy is just something that's been hurt so long, it's forgotten how to ask for help. Morrison was quiet after that, lost in thoughts I couldn't guess at. But as we crested the rise that would take us back to town, he spoke again. The terraforming funds I stole. They're in an account on Kepler Station. Access codes are in my personal files. Why tell me this? He shrugged. Maybe because I'm tired of running. Or maybe because that thing back there made me remember what it feels like to be human. We reached the settlement as the twin suns were rising, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The locals watched us approach with wary hope, and I saw some of them carrying books, old volumes pulled from storage, pages yellow with age. The bartender met us at the saloon door. You made it back. We did. I handed Morrison over to the local constable, such as he was, and the water situation might be improving soon. How's that? I thought about the Thornkeeper, standing alone in its amphitheater, surrounded by the ghosts of a dead world. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to listen, and maybe a few good poems. The bartender laughed, but this time there was hope in it. Well, I'll be damned. Poetry saving the day. Who'd have thought? I collected my bounty and booked passage off-world, but as my ship lifted away from Perdition's surface, I found myself already planning my return. There were other settlements out there, other people dying of thirst while sitting on top of an ocean, and there was a lonely intelligence in the desert, hungry for human words and human connection. Maybe the water wars weren't over, but maybe, just maybe, they could end with something other than guns and blood. Maybe they could end with understanding, with the recognition that even the strangest intelligence could be reached with the right words. As Perdition fell away beneath me, I pulled out my journal and began to write. There were poems to be crafted, verses to be polished, and somewhere in the deep desert, a guardian waited for the gift of human truth, wrapped in human words. The universe was vast and cold and mostly empty, but it was also full of wonders. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, you could find beauty in the strangest places, even in the heart of a talking cactus with a taste for poetry.